Wednesday, January 6th. Here in the West, it's known as the Epiphany. It's also known as Three Kings Day. But in my Armenian community, it is Christmas. And in our language, it is actually translated as Holy Birth. That's how we say Christmas, Surp Zunund. And I was recognizing Christmas that day. And for those of you that were on our Christmas Eve service, I spoke about the holy birth within us, within our lives, within our actions, our awareness, within each other. That's what Christmas is in my spiritual lens, the opportunity for that birth. It's something to consider, having witnessed what we did on January 6th and the days to follow, the sacred time where we're meant to recognize the birth of the holy. So on January 6th, that afternoon, I turned on my television, as many of us did, I'm sure. I turned it on to watch the Senate results because I was very excited that Reverend Raphael Warnock had been elected to Senate. And I was waiting with my fingers crossed to see if John Ossoff had also been confirmed. I also thought, hey, why not watch the Senate approve Joe Biden while I'm at it? And I'm sure you'll agree with me that what we witnessed that afternoon was beyond anything that we could imagine. But I don't know about you, but I felt several things at the very same time. I felt completely shocked and heartbroken, and yet simultaneously not surprised at all. Did any of you feel that same way? I see a lot of hands going up and heads nodding. You know, with the buildup, thank you, with the buildup of the last, hold on, I just want to mute that person. With the buildup of the last 4 years, especially since the election, it was no wonder I was not surprised, or we were not surprised. Over the past 2 months, Donald Trump was repeatedly asked the same question, which he never once actually answered. Will you agree to the peaceful transfer of power? His answer was, it depends, or we'll see. 5 years after the Trump era began, a physical assault on American democracy, both felt shocking and inevitable, a culmination of everything that has been building up since 2015. As I was watching this, I was thinking again, as many of you, I'm certain, thought as well, oh my God, if these people were black or brown, there is no way in the world this could be happening. I didn't need the news media to tell me to pay attention to that. It was like so astounding. And then after President-elect Biden told Donald Trump to go say something, Donald Trump let the insurgents know, go home, we love you, you're special. Here we are 4 or 5 days later, together, and the cathedral of democracy as we know it has been pillaged, and democracy has been scarred. 5 people are dead who did not have to die, and there are calls to impeach Donald Trump this week, to start that impeachment hearings. So on this day of Holy Birth, January 6th, what will we do in hindsight with what happened as a society and as individuals? Last week, I spoke about how soil needs to be disrupted for a new seed to take hold. And interestingly enough, Reverend Paul sent out a message in response to what happened on Wednesday, with his profound response, sharing the following. He said, "No matter whom you are or what you do, the ground is always shaky." He said, and he shared that the really good news is that shaky ground is fertile ground for spiritual growth and awakening. There are no coincidences, at least in my opinion. And it's really interesting that Reverend Paul and I have been landing right in that area this last week. So my question for all of you and for myself right now is, what is our spiritual invitation here? In these times of profound disruption or shaky ground? Well, I think this is an individual opportunity for each of us. And I can't tell you what your invitation is, but I'll tell you what mine is. We are all individuals, and we have our own realization of what is important and what is sacred in our individual journeys back home to what is really love and spirit, our true essence. And you need to honor your own invitation, but now here's mine. In a world where power is always wrestling to control, whether it is the government, politics, white supremacy, ethnicism, political leaders, or the media, there's always a wrestle to control us. There's always a wrestle to control. My spiritual invitation is to do my best to try to walk through the world more awake and less manipulated. These people that were part of the uprising last week were manipulated by the leader of this country, by other political leaders who lay quiet as things unfolded over these last 4 years, by the media, by conspiracy theorists, and they were manipulated to do and actually do what they thought was noble and right. And I want to just validate what a stretch that is to think that people thought what they were doing were noble and right. But it was for them, for people that had been fed fear, hatred, and separation. The result is no different than Al-Qaeda or any other brainwashed group of individuals that are fed hatred. You know, there's natural fears that we are born with as human beings. These are natural, like falling, like fear of heights, fear of the dark, fear of closed spaces. But that fear is manufactured, it's fed. And our work and our challenge is to continue, in spite of what we are witnessing, to build the beloved community. And it is not through creating more fear. It is to stand up for justice. It is to stand up for accountability, and it is to stand up for truth. Ibram X. Kendi shared the following in an interview the day after the attack. And he said the following. He said, "We saw white privilege in display in the U.S. Capitol. If they were black, they would have been laid out by the police. That was white privilege on display. And this is an opportunity for people to recognize the double standard in this country." And with all the BLM and anti-racism marches that have gone on this year, 93% of them were completely peaceful. And Kendi goes on to share that as a professor, he said that would be an A. This is all, and he goes on to talk about accountability, which is really where my attention is today. It's about accountability and truth, and this is what he shares. He shares that Confederates were not held accountable. Lynchers were not held accountable. The president today, or yesterday, has not been held accountable. Insurgents, and this was the day after, have not been held accountable, those good people. As the president put it, go home. We love you. What we saw yesterday, he goes on to say, was part of us. And if we don't own this, we cannot rid ourselves of this. He said, if we don't own this, we cannot rid ourselves of this. I attended something called the Revolutionary Love Conference a couple years ago. It was probably the most amazing activism conference that goes on in the country. And it's led by Jackie Lewis, who is a pretty astounding activist and minister. One of my takeaways from this conference was the following. One of the and I don't remember who was the person who was speaking that pointed this out, but they said that we as Americans are trained to blame down or to blame across, to blame this way or that way. We're not trained to blame up. We don't blame up in general. And those in power encourage us to blame each other. It's all the trickling down from above, political leaders, religious leaders, all of those above us. That is how they control us. They force us to blame each other. We can't lose sight of those that need to be accountable. And let me clarify, I feel that everyone who is part of what happened on Wednesday needs to be prosecuted to the fullest, absolute fullest extent of our law. They need to be held fully accountable. But they were at the effect of those that caused this. They were at the effect. They were at the effect of the one that encouraged them and those that Donald Trump's son. I'm just going to be very blatant today. I'm not pulling any punches in what I have to say. And Giuliani before, and everything that's gone on over these last 4 years. They were at the effect of a Congress that turned their head and allowed this kind of behavior in this country for so long. They were at the effect of it all. And, you know, many people were saying, oh, kudos to Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham for changing their mind. One of my friends, my very bright friend Roseanne, said that those senators were like rats jumping off a sinking ship in a desperate last measure to save their own lives, to save their own skin. We as a nation are called to stand up for accountability and truth, and ultimately for love. And even though that word sounds sappy, it is at the core of everything that is sacred. If we are fighting for love, we don't do this. If we are fighting for oneness, we don't do this. In our work for accountability, truth, and justice, love needs to be our lens. For we will only create more violence and separation if it is not. I may sound like a broken record, but my needle will always go to the same spot on the turntable. Our ultimate goal is the beloved community. We say this every week, almost, right? It is the goal of Unitarian Universalist congregations. And we are not going to hate our way there. So let us exercise our voices, our work, our prayers, our intention, our actions for justice and for equality, and be a voice for those who have no voice. Through love, by love, fierce love, unbending love, for every sacred path is paved with love. My intention is to stay on track, to stay awake. That's my hope. That's what I try. That's what I'm going to hope to do right now. And continue to demand truth and accountability from the pulpit and from my life. So what was the experience? Let's look at the other side now. What was the experience of holy birth that happened on January 6th? Was there one? I think there was. I saw. I hope you did too. On this day of holy birth, we saw truth. The world cannot continue to believe that white supremacy, white patriarchy, and white privilege does not exist any longer. We cannot ignore what we saw. We saw what, if it was a made-for-TV movie, it might not have even been as extreme as what we saw, right? On Wednesday. The world cannot unsee, and our nation cannot unsee what has been seen. We saw how democracy can turn when people are fed lies, hatred, and when the nation's leaders are left unchecked. But we also saw, on this day of holy birth, we saw progress. We saw the election of Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff, a Black man and a Jewish man, to the Senate in Georgia. In Georgia. This is phenomenal. This is phenomenal. And we also saw Joe Biden become verified as the 46th president of the United States and Kamala Harris as the vice president of the United States. And on this day of holy birth, we also saw what love unleashed is like. Love unleashed is when Georgia can elect a black and a Jewish man, a black man and a Jewish man to be in the Senate. That is love unleashed. A cabinet that's the most multiracial cabinet in the history of the United States. That is love unleashed. A black female vice president. That is love unleashed. So in the midst of this soil being disrupted, we saw what love can do. We saw what truth can do. And we saw what justice can do. And we now have an opportunity to bring our hearts and our love and our intention to a country that so desperately needs it. So amidst the struggles and amidst of the structures burning down, we are moving forward. Change is coming. This is our opportunity. And yes, democracy has been interrupted, but it has not been stopped. My dear, dear friend, Reverend Ty Holmes, who's my brother in ministry, and he is an astounding speaker and man, shared the following words with me and a couple of our colleagues this week. And he said this. By the way, he is an African-American minister and activist. I cannot say that I will ever be surprised by the lengths that white supremacy will go to stay supreme. But I am surprised at my capacity to be heartbroken again and again and again. Every incident feels like a fresh wound. And all I can do is let the pain remind me that there is work to do. I feel as if a huge part of being human, he goes on to say, is accepting the fact that the world can always be more just and more loving. And working to make it so, as Ali puts it, is the rent we pay for the gift of being alive. I'm going to paraphrase what he said. The world can always be more just and more loving. And working to make this so is the rent we pay for the gift of being alive. And I'd like to close with a moment of just sharing a prayer or an intention. You could call it whatever it is for this community and for us and for this world, because we have just gone through so much. So source of love that is within us and that ties us together, we recognize the goodness within us and our hopes for making great change in this country. May we May our intentions within us trickle out into the world around us in our actions, our words, our deeds, as we move towards a more just and a more loving world, country. May it be so. May it be so. If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.